After installing Linux Mint 20 onto my hardware, I loaded the NVIDIA graphics driver and things went a little bit south from there, so we're going to look at some options. This is pretty much what my Linux Mint system looked like after I installed it. Obviously I've changed the theming a little bit here, but we'll go in and have a look at the kernels. We'll click on the Update Manager and we'll go View Linux Kernels. We can see here we're active on the 5.4039. This one here is the one that was default when I installed the system. And over here you can see 5.3 on the left, and there's a couple in there as I've been playing with this system a little bit. Now before you do what we're going to demonstrate in the video, if you've got Secure Boot enabled, I would strongly recommend you disable Secure Boot, as that's what solved it for me. But before I discovered that, I went through this process, so I'm just going to show you the process that I went through and how I arrived at it, etc. But again, if you've got Secure Boot, I'd try that first because it seemed to work. This is actually installed onto my hardware. This is what the system looked like after I installed the NVIDIA driver. So let's have a look here. You can see we're still active on the 5.439. This is our 5.3 installed. You see there's nothing in the NVIDIA server settings here. As you can see, there's a bit of a conversation taking place here about the various possible causes and remedies, etc. And Clem suggested going over to Mainline, so we found Mainline. This is how I cured it. I don't know if it's the correct way of doing it or not, but it certainly worked for me. Turning off Secure Boot also worked for me, but I didn't find that information out until after I'd gone through this process. So I'm going to show you the process. Whether you want to do it or not is entirely up to you, and of course you're doing it entirely at your own risk. And obviously changing boot parameters and messing around with the GRUB file can leave you with a system that will not boot. So I can't stress that enough. That said, this did work for me. So let's give it a shot and see what happens. We'll just have a look at the kernel. So we click on the Update Manager. We'll go View, Linux Kernels. Get a little warning. We'll continue. And we can see on the left 5.4. We're currently active on the 5.4.039. And when I installed this system, it was on this one here, 5.426. So I installed the system on that, and then it quickly updated to the 39. But you'll notice there's no other entries over on the left-hand side. And when we're done, we should see one there for 5.3. So off I went looking for Mainline. It is here. This is the whole directory. You can see it's quite extensive. And if we go in here, I've actually gone, this is the version 5.3 mainline build. And down here, this is for AMD 64. So this is 64-bit for 64-bit processors. So whether it's AMD or Intel, it's just named AMD 64 because AMD came up with 64-bit before Intel did, so it's naming rights. It's a little bit confusing, but that's what that means there. We'll start with this top one, the top two in fact, and then we're going to get this one here, which has generic in it, and this one here as well with generic in it. And this is the order that I've found that I had to do it in. So we'll start at the top. We click on it and see it wants to open with GW package installer, so we'll say OK to that. This one's only 10 megabytes, so it won't take long to come down. Okay, the first download's done, so we're going to click Install Package. Now, there's no reason you couldn't download all these and then run them, but I do recommend running them in this order because I've tried different orders. I've done this a number of times and I've got different errors. So this seems to work. And now it's finished. Same version's already installed. The only option is to reinstall the package, so we know that's done. We're now going to select this second one down here, which has the word generic in its name. And again, we're going to open with GDebi. It was nice and fast, so we'll install this package. And that's done. We're going to come back to this one here shortly. We're going to get this second last one first, with generic in the name. So we're going to click on this one. This one's a little bit bigger, it's nearly 50 megabytes. So again, we're going to open it with the package installer. So we'll click OK. And we'll come back when that's finished downloading. And our package is turned up, so again, install the package. This one will take a little bit longer because it's a bit bigger. And that one's done. And now we come back up into this middle one here with generic in the name again. We click on that. And we'll go OK. And install the package. Now, I actually did this on hardware, on bare metal as they call it, and it worked. I'm actually demonstrating it here on a virtual machine. So if you got the result that I showed earlier in the video about the funny looking desktop, this might possibly work for you. But again, you do it entirely at your own risk. Okay, that's finished, and we can close out of there. And that's it, we're done in there. Let's go and have a look at the updater. And view Linux kernels. We heed the warning and we continue. And you can see now we've got a 5.3 over to the side, so we're still active on our 5.439. We've got this 5.3 over here installed. So we're going to close out of here, and here we're going to reboot now, and I'll be holding the shift key down as we start the rebooting process. I'm holding shift down, and here's our GRUB menu. We can see at the top it's defaulting to Linux Mint 20 Mate, and we've got advanced options below it. So we're going to go to the advanced options, and we'll have a look in there. And down the very near the bottom here, this is the one we want. I'll just take the highlight off it so you can see it. That's that second one up from the bottom there, 5.3.0-500300 generic. That one there. Now counting from the top, with the top being 0, this one will be 1, 2, 3, 4. So our number is 4 in there. Let's go back to the first screen. In here, the default will boot up the latest kernel. What we want to do now is we want to boot into the advanced mode and pick that kernel at each restart. So once again here, the default at the top is Linux Mint 20 Mate. However, we want to boot off the advanced options. Linux Mint up the top is 0 and this is 1. So on our first screen, our option is 1. That's 0 and that's 1. And then on our second screen, that's 0 at the top, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we want 1 and then we want 4. So I'm just going to escape. I'll boot back in. We'll be on the original kernel still, which I'll show you when we get back up to the desktop. We'll be on the 5.439 or the latest kernel still, which we'll see here momentarily. We'll have a look at the kernels. As you'll see, we're still on the 5.439 kernel. Nothing's really changed. So you can see that it's active. And there's our 5.3 installed. So we'll close out of there. And we'll get rid of the welcome screen. Now we actually need the terminal for this. And we're going to paste in this command. This will be in the description of the video. So it's sudo nano /etc/default/grub. We'll press enter, put in our password. And this is what happens. Now you can see the cursor blinking up in the top left hand corner. So we're going to use the down arrow, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where it says grub default equals 0. We're going to use the right arrow on the keyboard. We're going to arrow across to the 0. We're going to delete the 0 and we're going to put in quotations. You'll remember from the GRUB screen a few moments ago that the very first screen, the menu we want, is menu 1, or the first one down from the top, which was 0. So we want 1, and then we use the shift key and the arrow, which is over near the right hand shift key or near the question mark. And on our second menu, if you recall, our kernel 5.3 version was menu entry 4. So we'll type the number 4 in there, and then we'll put another quotation mark there. And that's going to tell it to open the first menu and then go to item number 4, which is the 5th line down, because the first line always counts as 0. So here we've changed the 0 to quotation 1, right arrow, or greater than, whatever that's called, and then a 4, and then another quotation. That's the only change we've made. If you think you've made a mistake, you've bumped the keyboard or something like that, just hit the X up here and close the terminal and start again. Because if you make a mistake in here, you could make your system unbootable. So again, you're doing this at your entire own risk. So I'm going to cancel that. So I'm pretty confident that I've got that right. That's what we want. And now we're going to press Control O. That's O, not 0. So Control O. And then we press Enter on the keyboard. And then we press Control X. And that brings us back to the terminal. And now we type sudo space update -grub and press enter. Now we can quit out of there. Let's do a restart again. Now I'm not going to hold the shift key down, I'm just going to let it boot. That's looking a little bit different already there. We'll let it go to the desktop and we'll have a look, see what kernel's running when we get up there. Okay, there's our desktop. Let's click on the Update Manager again, and we'll go View, Linux Kernels, Continue, and we can see the 5.4 is showing installed now. It's not showing active. That one's not active. Let's look at the 5.3, and it is now active. So we're actually running off that kernel. And if we go to the system monitor here, we can even see it here on the system monitor, 5.3. So we'll close out of there. Close out of there. So the system's now set to boot each time off that until there's an update in the kernel or something like that that shuffles the list around. So you'll need to be mindful of that. If you get a kernel update in the future, that's going to push your 5.3 further down the list, and it's going to start booting the next kernel up from it. So you'll need to be mindful of that. Any kernel updates are going to change that one. Oh, we'll go in there and we'll look. So any kernel update in the future is going to change the order of this one arrow 4 that we've put in here. So be mindful if you get a kernel update, that's going to potentially alter that. So we're going to come down here now. I'll just show you how this works. So timeout is hidden to the equals so that it looks like that. Then we're going to down arrow, grub timeout equals 0. We're going to backspace that out. We'll use 5 as 5 seconds. Again, we'll go Control O, which writes out the file, and then we press Enter, and then Control X to exit. And once again, we run the update command, the sudo update grub. And we'll do another restart. And we should get a 5-second timeout with the grub menu here in a moment. So there's the menu, there's the counter going down the bottom. We'll just let it go. And once again, we'll go and have a look at our kernel, just to double check. Installed, and this one should be active. And there we go. If the 5.3 doesn't work, so here we are at the mainline build where we got all our files from. If you backspace out the v5.3 up the top here and press enter, that'll take you back to the directory, or back up one directory level. And if we start scrolling down, we can see here we're at version 3. We'll scroll down a bit further, we're in version 4s. Now we're hitting the 5s, and if we scroll down a bit further, 5.0, you see there we're on 5.0, 5.1s, 5.2s, and there's our 5.3 that we actually used right there. RC is release candidate, so I probably wouldn't recommend using those. If 5.3 doesn't work, I'd probably go back to one of these other ones and go through the same process. So let's just click on one to have a look. So same thing, I would use the top line, looking at this. And then I'd use the second line with generic. Then I'd use this second last line with generic in it also. And then finally I'd use this line here with generic the same way we did in the earlier part of the video. I don't know if that's the correct way of doing it, but that's how I did it, and it worked for me. It took me a couple of goes to figure it all out. So again, you do that at your own risk, and remember that altering that that file in the terminal, this one here, altering this file and getting that wrong can have drastic effects on your system and leave you with a non-bootable system. So I can't stress that enough to make sure you get it right, and if you're not sure, to quit out of it and come back in and try again before saving any of it. And bear in mind that 1 and 4 is here on my system. Yours may be different, particularly if you're dual booting, or if you've got extra kernels installed or less kernels installed. The 1 and 4 will be different, but you're always counting from 0 at the top. So your top line 0, then you count down to the line you want, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So we'll quit out of there. As I say, that's how I did it. I don't know if it's the correct way of doing it. It was certainly different than what I expected. I'm not sure what I expected, but I didn't expect it to be anything like that. So if that works for you, more power to you.